Welcome in, folks, to the High School Huddle here on RochesterFirst.com. I'm AJ Feldman. That guy virtually next to me is Carl Jones, breaking everything down. Section 5, football, soccer, field hockey, volleyball, everything and anything that's going on. It's a great time to be a high school sports fan, like we mentioned last week. Sectionals in full swing now. Every sport into their sectionals in every single class. Some of them already wrapped up already. Some of them wrapping up this week. Some of them wrapping up today if you're watching this on Thursday. Some of them already wrapped up if you're catching up on behind. But it's a great time to be a high school sports fan, and we are here to talk about everything that went down in the last week and look ahead to what we got coming up in sectional play. Now, the first thing we were going to talk about last week, big story, all of the craziness that happened in Class AA football in the final week 8 of the regular season. We kind of thought we had this all figured out, McQuaid and Aquinas, they played a tight game, maybe a little tighter than we expected, so we figured that would be a good championship game. But what happened in week 8 really rocked us on our feet. Carl, I'll let you go first with you were at the Aquinas-Hilton game, and that turned into, an unexpected result, to say the least.
Yeah, unexpected is a great way to describe it. It started out, I arrived at halftime of the game, and it was 14-13, which kind of shocked me a little bit because I'd seen Hilton a little bit earlier in the year and Aquinas as well. And to see the game was that close, I was kind of shocked. So then I got there, and the third quarter really wasn't, I guess, didn't have too many theatrics. But then we get to the fourth quarter, and 3 minutes left in the game. Aquinas gets all the way down to the 1 yard line. A couple penalties push them back. And then they drive a little bit further, and they're out of the 5. Gets the field goal kick blocked. So then now Hilton has the ball on their own 5, and they're trying to get out of their own end zone, but then they throw a pick 6 the next play. So then now Hilton has to go down the field to win the game against Aquinas. And if anyone's ever seen Hilton before, they're kind of a ground and pound approach team. They're not really, an air it out team that feels comfortable in those situations.
Yeah, they're more apt to go on a 10-minute drive than a 1-minute drive. That's for sure.
Exactly. Like, I'm on the sidelines sitting here like, oh, well, I mean, I'm not going to predict winners here, but I mean, based off what I see, this is going to be an uphill battle for the Cadets. And they found a way. They started off the drive running the ball, which kind of cracked me up at first. I'm like, oh, they're not changing off this philosophy whatsoever. But they threw a couple pop passes to their tight end, Jake Smith. They drew a couple pass interference calls, and they ended up scoring with about 40 seconds left, and they pulled off the upset. I mean, that's what, high school football is all about, just seeing great games like that and seeing the kids being able to pull off a tough game like that at home in front of their friends and their family. So I thought that was a crazy game, and I did not expect that whatsoever, based off what I've seen previous to that game.
Yeah, and Hilton, they're definitely playing their best football of late. They've won 4 of their last 5 games. Their one loss coming to McQuaid. We do have to note in that Aquinas-Hilton game, Will Benjamin for Aquinas did not play. Unsure whether it's an injury thing. They were just holding him out, something else. Who knows why he wasn't playing in that game. But I think that just goes to show that, one player misses, one team rises up to the occasion. Any team can beat anybody in Class AA. And I talked to that. We'll get to, Pittsford a little bit later, just later, but it's definitely up for grabs. You really can't have an off night. If you don't bring your A game, the other team does. Who knows what's going to happen in these playoffs? And then the double A game I was at, Pittsford and McQuaid. So I started my night off at East Rochester. Was going to get a couple of quick scores from there, then go over to McQuaid-Pittsford because I thought it'd be a pretty tight game. I'm at East Rochester checking on my phone. I was like, all right, McQuaid went up 7-0. All right, whatever. McQuaid went up 14-0. I'm thinking, I guess I gave maybe Pittsford a little bit too much credit. It's going to be another McQuaid win. Pittsford, second quarter on, just takes over in this game. They score the next, I believe it was, so they had 14. I think they actually had all their 31 points in a row before Pittsford got on the board. Pittsford ended up getting that win 31-21. The big story of that game, Jackson Green kind of emerging onto the scene. He had played really well to start the season. He missed the first 4 games with just kind of getting back to 100% with some injuries from the off season. Came back. I believe he has 9 touchdowns in his first his 4 games played so far. here this year. He is, potentially probably the best athlete in Section 5 football right now. Scored 3 of those touchdowns in the second quarter. All of the 3 scores for Pittsford. And certainly he just opens up that offense so much. I mean, Pittsford traditionally more of a running football team. They do have a nice back in Nick Senko. And just when you can get that guy on the outside to, draw the team's top defender, eventually they went to double coverage in the second half of that McQuaid game. It just opens up everything for everybody. And Pittsford really has asserted themselves as getting into that top tier. Just 2 weeks ago, we thought that tier might have been McQuaid all alone. Now it's McQuaid, Aquinas, and Pittsford. We think it'll be Aquinas and Pittsford in the semifinal game, so that'll be a really fun matchup. But yeah, I think it just goes to show that this Class AA bracket is going to be a lot more interesting than we thought, like I said, just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, especially, the big boy football, nothing against like the other divisions. Obviously, there's some really fantastic teams in A, B, and C, and so forth, and so on. But just seeing like the big class and the big schools, and that there's obviously, the traditional top dogs, like you say, like McQuaid and Aquinas, but the other teams aren't backing down. There's no fear in them whatsoever. So I think that's going to be really intriguing to see, starting from this upcoming Friday, tomorrow, depending on when you're listening. Like this is going to be an exciting bracket, game in and game out. I can't wait as a spectator.
Yeah, Pittsford has actually never won a sectional football title. When they were separate schools, I believe it was Sutherland ended up winning 3 in the early 80s. But Pittsford has never won a sectional title. Kind of, I asked Thad about it. I was like, does this seem right? Pittsford never won a sectional title. It's like, it seems like it shouldn't be right, but it seems like it could be. So yeah, we've got a lot of great stuff coming up in AA. We'll get to that probably more next week when actually we'll touch on a little bit later in the show with the Class AA craziness. But yeah, like we said, I think McQuaid did figure out some stuff later in the game. They started doubling Jackson Green, and Pittsford only scored 1 touchdown in the second half. So certainly they might have tried to figure something out. I think they gave Zay Collier a shot to defend Jackson Green one-on-one. That's a tough task, even with the talent of Zay Collier. And Collier actually did leave the game late. He took a rough hit over the middle as a receiver trying to catch a pass. Potentially some sort of get shaken up or concussion. Who knows? We're not going to speculate, but certainly something to watch. They have a bye this week, so we won't even get to see that this week. But we wish him the best, and we hope he gets back out there. Before we turn our attention to the other sports, we're going to go to the Class A bracket here. Quarterfinals last week, not a ton happened that we didn't expect. It was all of the top seeds winning 1 through 4, setting up our run through. Carl, you were at the Arcadia Athena game, which was the only one that was within, maybe even within 3 scores last week. Definitely a defensive slugfest with Arcadia once again coming out with a win based on being able to get that extra point there.
Yeah, it was another one of those. Obviously, earlier in the year, I think it was 14-12. I want to say the result was. It was another
correct. Yes,
slugfest. And when you got 2 schools that are rivals or in the same community, you're always going to get tough competitive battles. So it was a fun game in a different way. Obviously, it's not all the fireworks and all the glitz and the glamour, but I mean, the kids, they played hard, they were competitive, and once again, in high school football, special teams matters. Whether it's your punt unit trying to not give up a punt block, or your field goal PAT unit trying to put the ball between the uprights, and it proved again in this game that it matters a ton because Arcadia made their extra point. However, Athena didn't even try. They went for 2 in the beginning of the fourth quarter when they scored their touchdown, and unfortunately came up short after a deflection at the goal line, and that was their best hope of winning that game. So it was a fun game in that regard, but man, just special teams matters. We need to get that going. # special teams matters.
Exactly. The rest of the games, like I said, went as planned 1 through 4. Coming up next week, Brighton at Thomas. We'll see if Eli Adams can do his thing. They had some trouble converting on all their chances. They could have certainly blown out Irondequoit by even more. We'll see if they can turn it around. UPrep and Schrader in the 2-3 matchup. Can Schrader's offense keep up with UPrep? Can Schrader shut down Ray Kim Chenier? We'll have to figure that one out. And then in A2, Spencerport and East, we also have Canandaigua Arcadia. When those two teams met in the regular season, Canandaigua did Canandaigua type things. But Spencerport and East, I was at that game earlier in the season. East really didn't seem to have any sort of an answer for the triple wing of Spencerport. We'll see if they can figure that out. It's much later in the season. They had a lot of young guys getting more playing time. Their skill position guys have really started to develop. So we'll see if East can shut down Spencerport's run, and then can Spencerport line up with the skill position players of East, who have been pretty talented as well. Moving on to, as we mentioned, we have a ton of other sports going on. Soccer and field hockey have taken the main stage in the past week or so. Volleyball is coming up next. Luckily, they get to play inside, so they don't have to rush through it well enough. Carl, very appreciative of the fact that after this, we're going inside next week. It's going to be very nice. We love the indoor sports. We just love them, especially this time of year. But first, let's head outside. Carl has been at some great soccer games the past couple of weeks. What's really stood out to you in your travels this week?
There's been a bunch of good games, and obviously, I had the fortune to go outside Tuesday during that monsoon and shoot a couple.
The record-setting day of rain.
Yeah, I was out there, and when I tell you that I could barely see it in the focus, and I don't know what I was shooting, I'm happy when I got back to my computer at the station that it was clear enough to show on TV. I was ecstatic. However,
I saw those highlights. I'm like, wow. I do not envy Carl. I assume it was Carl Sheen. I do not envy Carl one bit as he is out at this football game or the soccer game.
But I will be remiss to not bring up and mention that thriller, classic, whatever you want to call a game last night at Webster Thomas between the top-seeded Athena Trojans taking on Sutherland. I showed up in the second half actually because I went to Schrader to see Penfield. We hadn't shot them all year. I wanted to see them. However, the game before them had went to PKs as well, so that game had started really, really late. So I said, you know what? Let me just go over to Old Reliable and see two teams that we've seen a lot this year. And boy, did I get introduced to sports reporting this entire week. Once with the weather and then now with playoff PK soccer. It was a great game. Rihanna Huntsell once again scored a goal for Athena. And Sutherland did a great job of actually trying to contain her the entire game. However, great players find a way to impact the game, as she did late in that game with about 13 minutes left in regulation.
Yeah, I saw that goal. That was just put your head down, go get us a goal, Rihanna. Go get us a goal, and she did.
Go make a play, all right? Go make a play. Put the team on your back, and she made a play for them. And I got introduced to the overtime rules really quickly. 10 minutes, and then 5 and 5, and then we go to PKs. Neither team had missed a goal throughout the first, 10 kicks, I guess you can say. Mm-hmm. And then they went to the 6th point, went to the 7th point, and then it was to the 8th point when Sutherland made their kick. And then Moran Proctor made a great play for Sutherland and was able to finish that game, I want to say, in under 3 hours. It felt like I was there for a long time. So I just want to give a big kudos and shout out to the Athena goalie. She's only an 8th grader, and she stepped up and she did I don't want to mispronounce her last name, but her name is Emily Montiglano, I want to say. I don't want to get it wrong, but she's an 8th grader, and she held her own throughout the entire game against a very, very, very tough Sutherland opponent. So she has a bright future ahead of her. And I know that the PK situation is definitely difficult as a goalie. Yeah. But I just want to give her credit just for competing and battling the way she did all night, because I do not envy being in her position whatsoever, especially as a 13 or 14-year-old.
Yeah, and they've still got 2 more years left of Rihanna Hudson. So you get some solid play in net, and you get a player like her. They were the 1 seed in this bracket. Obviously, like you mentioned, tough loss there. We have not seen the last of Athena, to say the least. Rest of the action in the girls bracket in the top 3 classes, we'll have Spencerport and Brighton in the Class A1 championship game. Spencerport taking care of business as they do with a 6-0 win over Mercy. Remember, in the regular season, that was a 1-0 game. So maybe Spencerport woke up a little bit, found their groove. And I think last week we did talk about Spencerport tying Schrader. That was on the crazy lightning game as well. So that Friday night, they only played about a half when it was 0-0. So we give Schrader credit for keeping them to 0-0. But if you're wondering, that's kind of what happened there. Spencerport will take on Brighton, who beat Churchville Chili in overtime by a score of 5-2 because they don't play sudden victory or sudden death. So you can rack up a 5-2 win in overtime. Maggie Cregan had 4 goals in that game and an assist.
What? Hold on, time out for a second. So for the first 80 minutes, we were tied. It was competitive. And then the last 10 minutes of overtime, Maggie Cregan decides to go Super Saiyan and just this. I'm done. Like, I got homework to do. Like, I got a science project. I got to go home.
I was at that the quarterfinal game, and Cregan left late in the game with an injury. I was reading. It was Tim Irvine who had it in Pick and Splinter. She didn't play in the first half. Eventually, things got the second half. They were down. They were like, "All right, we got nothing to lose here. Put her back in." She took over that game. So welcome to Section 5 Best, Maggie Cregan, first off. And second off, that'll be a tough matchup for Brighton and Spencerport. In the regular season when those two teams played, I believe it was Spencerport doing Spencerport type things. They ended up winning by a final score of 5-1 as I pull it up right now. So, I did see Brighton in the quarterfinals. They kind of play with their food a little bit against Gates Chili. And almost lost to Churchville Chili here. So they're going to have a tough uphill battle, but you have a player like Maggie Cregan who knows what she can do. A2 matchup is going to be Mendon and Sutherland, a Pittsford battle in the A2 brackets. I was at one of those regular season games. That time it was Mendon going to Sutherland and winning that one. Those two teams split in the regular season. Let me get these scores up here. Yes, it was a 2-1 win for Mendon at Sutherland, and then a 1-0 victory for Sutherland at Mendon. So the road team winning both times. That was a very evenly played game when I went to there, so that should be a good matchup as well. And then AA, Penfield and Fairport. Penfield's kind of been the top dogs in AA bracket all year. They won 3-0 against Hilton in the semifinals. Fairport with a 2-1 win over Rush Henrietta that you said took more than regulation just to decide. So that should be a good bracket coming up there in our girls side. Boys side still in the semifinals in all of the brackets. AA coming tonight. Class A coming tomorrow. So we'll talk about that more next week as we have I think by the time we get tape on Thursday, those brackets will be decided. So I guess we'll talk about the championship games. But AA or single A, I believe you were at the Sutherland game, correct, Carl?
I was.
And that was taking care of business in the slop, I guess is probably the best you can say.
Yeah, it was just another game where kudos to the kids for going out in those conditions, because I know it was very fun for me to sit there and try to compete with Mother Nature myself with the camera. But no, just it was another game where you're not just competing against your opponent, you're competing with the conditions as well. And that's never easy at any level of sport or in any sport. So big shout outs to Sutherland being able to, because that game wasn't like in their grasp and their control the entire game. And I know the big thing with me is being able to win when you're in adverse conditions, and they did just that. So big shout out to them being able to overcome that and pull out the victory.
Yeah, and then AA, all 4 teams very strong. McQuaid, Fairport, Hilton, Penfield. Those are going to happen later tonight with the championship game coming on November 2nd. So that'll be an exciting one as well. I want to talk briefly about the field hockey game that I was at Tuesday night. It was Sutherland and East Rochester. Sutherland coming out with the 4-3 overtime victory. Now, this was a rematch of last year's Class BC championship game where East Rochester won in overtime. So it was a great redemption for Sutherland. Ava Blyer netting a goal and 2 assists. Annabelle Catranio with a hat trick, as well as the overtime game winner for East Rochester, or for Sutherland, excuse me. That was just a great back and forth game. First half, first quarter, it was 2-1 Sutherland, even though East Rochester kind of controlled the play. East Rochester Gates Chili, in fact. They're combined this year, but a lot of firepower comes from East Rochester. But East Rochester Gates Chili kind of controlled the play. Sutherland just happened to score on their two chances, taking advantage of what they got. And then, East Rochester able to tie it up in the third quarter, goes to overtime, and Sutherland gets their redemption. So that sets up a Sutherland-Mendon game that's going on tonight. If you're watching this on Thursday, another Pittsford battle. Carl was at that regular season game, one of those games where a 1-0 slugfest. So hopefully they give us a little more excitement here tonight, as much as we love the good defensive struggle, but that should be a good one as well. I love the field hockey brackets. I think it's really exciting. And Class A, I don't think they had to push their game back from Tuesday to Wednesday because of the rain. I don't know if they're going to still play on Friday. They're going to push that back. I haven't seen that just quite yet. Maybe I can look that up as we get to our next segment. Speaking of our next segment, we have a whole bunch of brackets opening up for football, AA, B, C, D, 8-man. We talked a little bit about AA already, so I don't think we have too much more to say on that for the quarterfinal round, seemingly. Hilton and Victor should be a pretty good matchup in the 4-5 game. Whether or not they can compete with McQuaid in the semifinals, whoever gets there, remains to be seen. But certainly that'll be the top matchup in the Class AA bracket. Class B, this is potentially the best bracket we've got so far, just because all those top three teams can certainly beat each other. And it'll be fun to watch. HFL at the 1 seed with 7-0, Batavia 7-1, Wayne at 5-2. Carl, you were at the HFL Batavia game, or was HFL winning based on an extra point? And HFL also beat Wayne earlier in the regular season by a point, so they're undefeated. They are certainly not unbeatable. What are you looking forward to watching in this Class B bracket, as someone who's seen some of these top teams duke it out?
Chaos. I'm all for it. I mean, I'm all for redemption. I'm all for this time of year. It's win or go home, and it's just exciting just because I know what it's like to be in these situations. I know I feel old now saying I know what it's like, but
back in my day.
Yeah, back in my day when I was playing high school football. No, but seriously though, I think the three top teams with Wayne. Wayne hasn't played Batavia this year, and I mean, I'm not going to – any given Friday is a thing. I get that. But I presume that they will meet with Batavia next week. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see how that works out. And then if HFL takes care of business, they'll get the winner of that, presuming that they take care of their own business in the Class B championship. But I'm excited. I think there's different flavors with each team. I think HFL kind of can attack all areas of the field, while Batavia is a little bit more explosive in some regards. So, I mean – it's exciting. I can't wait. Like you said, the other brackets may be a little bit more top heavy with just like there's an obvious collision course with the championship games. I think Class B, where some things can shake up with terms of that Wayne Batavia game, presumably next round. So it'll be fun. I can't wait.
Yeah, and you've got some great quarterbacks in that entire class. Honeyway Falls, you got Brody Young, man in the attack, Jesse Reinhardt for Batavia, who was their starter last year as well. Last year was HFL and Batavia in that sectional championship game. HFL, they got pushed by Batavia. It turned out to be, I think it was like a 2-score, 3-score game, but that game was interesting as well. And then Wayne led by Mason Blankenberg, a great dual threat quarterback for the Eagles. So that'll be a really interesting bracket. And that, there's a lot to be said about, when basically every team makes the playoffs, how much does a regular season matter? HFL getting that 1 seed is such a big deal. Dansville, Waco, they're no slouches, but they're certainly not on the tier of Batavia or Wayne. So them, getting a lesser opponent in that semifinal matchup certainly going to be important. And that'll be a fun bracket to watch.
I know attrition this time of year. I mean, who's healthy?
Exactly.
Who can and put the best team out there in terms of available bodies. So that is huge. That's a great point.
Yeah, and we talk about any given Friday or whatever. You got to win 2 tight games compared to 1. It's certainly, we don't have to, say how much that matters for us. Moving on to Class C, where it's been the East Rochester Gananda show so far this season. East Rochester at 8-1. You've also got Leroy at 7-1, Haverling at 6-1, and then a Livonia team that's had some. They've played HFL earlier in the season. They're at 4-3, but they're a stronger 4-3 than their record indicates. But we've both seen East Rochester Gananda play so far this year. They've looked really good when we've seen them play, and they're going to be a tough team to beat in the sectionals.
Oh, very tough team, especially as we talked about last week, going and taking on and defeating Wayne in the style that they did. A team in a class ahead of them, I think, is very huge. It's big, and it shows that they can compete with some of the top dogs. Prepare them for this sectional run that they're about to go on. But I'm interested to see if they do end up eventually meeting with Leroy. That was only a 2-score game. It was a 2-score game in the fact that they only won by 12. So, extra points, special teams matters. If some things, ball bounces a certain way. I saw that Hilton Aquinas game where a couple balls bounced a certain way, and that game went haywire. All right, so it'll be an interesting bracket, another one to say the least.
Yeah, and East Rochester going on, like you mentioned, 18-6 over Leroy. Wayne, they won 28-15. Other than that, they they have not played Haverling, also at 6-1 so far this year. So we'll see how they match up there. And then the 4 seed of Letchworth Warsaw Perry, they won in week 1, 32-14. But certainly a lot can change between week 1 and in the playoffs. So East Rochester Gananda, we've liked them all season long. They're state ranked. We think we have good things in their future, but that'll be a fun bracket to see as well. And then in Class D, you've got really 3 top dogs in that bracket there. Oakfield, Alabama, Elba at 8-0, who took care of Avon pretty convincingly in the regular season game. I'll pull up the score here, but that game we thought was maybe going to be a little bit closer. We thought Avon was certainly the favorite, the defending sectional champs, state ranked. But OAE took care of business with a 24-7 win. Now, of course, the next game they went out and played Boulevard Richburg, who was at 5-3. They only won 14-13. So, a lot of this stuff it can change any given week. Alexander's had some really strong showing so far this year as well. They took Avon right down to the wire as I pull up that game results. That was Avon defeating Alexander 12-10, Avon beating Alexander 12-10 early in the season. So especially when you get into these lower brackets where, you might not have the offensive, firepower to make these games, 28-24 or something like that. When you're playing these, these 7-6 games, these 14-13 games, when these players are, a lot of running in between the tackles, a lot of short passes, things like that. You shorten the game, upsets are much more likely to happen. Last year, OAE was, I believe, undefeated going into the regular season. They lost 9-7 in the first round of the playoffs. They got upset. So that can certainly happen where, a couple drives go your way, a blocked punt, a fumble, something like that. And, when there's not a lot of possessions in the game, that could turn around real quick.
Real quick. And another thing about this bracket in particular that I've always enjoyed, and it's just about, I guess, America in general when it comes to football, is that the small towns and the small, close-knit, low-level football, I'm not going to say low-level in terms of quality, but just in the smaller enrollment, is always cool because the communities really, really are behind these schools, and it's huge. And I recommend everyone to just go to one game of Class C or D and just see how the community really gets behind these kids, because these kids have grown up in these communities their entire lives. They were ball boys at 5, 6, 7 years old, and they just could not wait until that one day they were able to play under those varsity bright lights and put on those colors that they've been dying to wear since they were first or second graders. So, just being able to see that growth, and obviously AJ knows the same thing, just being able to just see that growth from kids just at 5, 6 years old, and then being able to finally put those colors on those small communities like that where, maybe football is everything for them, right? It's really cool. So just being able for them to get this experience in the sectionals is huge.
Yeah, and you have that point as well. Some of these schools as well, which is kind of a new development, just based on low numbers for football. You're also getting these communities coming together. Your Oakfield, Alabama Elbas, your East Rochester Ganondas, your things like that, where you have the two schools coming together, who potentially maybe were rivals in the past, and now they're together. So you get that aspect as well. Yeah, Class D is going to be a fun bracket to watch. If you want to go out and get and see that game, the way the schedules shape out, the only other game that's going on in that Class D on Friday, the 12th, that's going to be the Class A crossover game, the state qualifier between the A1 and the A2. So maybe if you're not super invested in that game, that's going to be out in Batavia, where a lot of those Class D schools resigned out at Vendetta Stadium. So maybe that's one you want to go check out. And then finally, the 8-man bracket, or should we rather say the Red Jacket brackets, who's actually not the number 1 seed. Frewsburg is at 5-0 as well. They haven't played in the regular season, but by everything we've seen so far, it's Red Jackets world, and we're just all living in it so far in 8-man football this year.
Yeah, I've seen them once this year, and that was all I needed to see. Kyle DeMore and company with that offense, they were explosive, especially for 8-man football. I saw them when they played Pembroke, and man, it was tough. It was a long, tough game for Pembroke. They're explosive, and they were fun, hard hitting, physical. Another small knit community thing, so it was cool to see the kids play in front of a crowd like that. If something were to shake up and happen in this bracket, color me shocked, but man, that was a dominant team in every essence of the word dominant.
Yeah, Red Jackets, they were not challenged last year at all. They have not been challenged so far this year. Last year it was the Logan Kiefer show, as you mentioned. This year it's Kyle DeMore and Dalton Hanline really leading the way for Red Jacket there. So far in the regular season, I'd have to do the math exactly, but 36-6 they won. I believe that's their closest margin of victory so far this year. 36-6. That was against Wellsville in week 2 of the season. So I mean, hey, the top seed in that bracket is technically Frewsburg. Let's see if I can pull up their scores. But they haven't looked. They beat Wellsville 37-28. But other than that, they have taken care of their competition. They beat Pembroke 59-24. So maybe Frewsburg can give Red Jacket some sort of a challenge. But as you said, we will be colored very surprised if this is not Red Jacket raising that brick at the end of the year. And unfortunately, which I figured out a couple of weeks ago, there is no 8-man state tournament, which is really, unfortunate, because we think Red Jacket could maybe go all the way in that one. But you can only beat the teams in front of you. You can only win the trophies. Hey, you win your sectional championship game by 80 points like they basically did last year. That's literally not exaggerating. It was like 71-8 or something like that over Pembroke. So, you state your case as the best team, you're going to feel pretty good at the end of the year either way. Before we wrap up, Carl, you have anything else to say before we break the huddle here?
No, I just want to give a good luck to all the participating parties and kids this weekend. This will be one of the most fun times of your lives to be able to talk about this for years on end, with your friends and families. I know to this day, I've talked to my friends about our playoff runs, no matter if it was game 1 or the runs that we went on. So you guys will enjoy this time. So please enjoy it. You'll never get it back. You're only a junior, a senior, sophomore once. And some of these schools are having generational type seasons. So please embrace that, because man, once high school's over with, you're washed up like me.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for you tonight on the High School Huddle, or whenever you're watching this show. We will be with you next week as well, as we continue to get into the class. All the brackets for all the sports. We'll have soccer championships, and we'll finally get a chance to talk about state tournaments. We have not had that since basically 2 years ago, with everything getting wiped out in the winter and the spring. And everything last year as well. We have state tournaments actually going on right now for girls tennis. They're going to be coming up soon for all of our sports. So we get state tournaments, which is always a fun time. As much as fun as the sectionals are, it's fun to see how well these teams stack up against everybody we've been watching the state, rankings is, McQuaid's 2, McQuaid's 3. No, they dropped down to 7, whatever. We can finally get to see it all play out. So that'll be a lot of fun. We can't wait to watch it. We can't wait to bring it to you as well. We've got tons of coverage at RochesterFirst.com. We've got a story on Jackson Green up there. We're going to have a story on Brendan Klasgens over at Brighton coming up shortly. You can watch that potentially by the time you view this podcast, but we've got a lot of action for us. News 8, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock every night, and on RochesterFirst.com. We will be back here next week for the high school huddle. Maybe we'll get Thad Brown to join us. He's been talking about maybe wanting to get into these playoff shows as well. But for now, it's AJ Feldman. It's Carl Jones. We are breaking the high school huddle. We will see you next time. Thank you very much for watching our podcast.